Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Lillian Cespedes Gonzalez back for another episode here on Travolution Tours on our YouTube channel. I hope that you're all doing really good, and I hope that you actually enjoyed this second episode on our list of exploring different destinations around Europe in this particular case. These are destinations, perhaps if you've already seen our Bulgarian episode, you might know a little bit more about the project, but these are destinations that either I have personally enjoyed as a traveler or as a tour guide, and in which I have done a fair amount of research to try and create an experience that is not just outside of the beaten path, but something that is a bit more meaningful and something that has a focus from the point of view of history, culture, and that more, I guess, wholesome experience of tourism. And today we're going to be talking about Greece. I spent a little while living in Athens, and as a result I had the opportunity to explore and learn, and of course do a lot of research while being in there. In this channel there is already quite an old video of my sort of review overall of what the experience was after being in there. But I don't think I necessarily did the explanation in the same way that I'm approaching this presentation today. I think the review was from a very personal sort of living in their tourism overall perspective. Today, however, I want to give you clues, ideas, and interesting hooks to create a lovely holiday in Greece and get you to explore parts that perhaps not many people often get out of their way to enjoy. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And before I get started, just very quickly want to thank a bunch all of our lovely supporters, the promoters, and sponsors on our PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. You have the links in the actual description of this video, but essentially it is thanks to the generosity of all of our sponsors and donors that we can keep on, creating free of access type of material. So if you want to keep on supporting us and if you want to ensure that all my knowledge goes around, for as long as possible, check us out, and thanks so much for your contributions. And on that note, let's actually get started. So we're gonna be looking at this from a very sort of specific perspective of Greece. I didn't want to do like running around like a headless chicken, going to all of the islands or whatever. So I want to give you the what I think is the very best experiences in Athens, the must visit museums, because I have found out a lot of people don't actually go to the museums in Greece, even though I found out that the museums are probably the part that is the most worthwhile, particularly from the point of view of your pocket. And then we're going to visit four destinations that really did make my trip to Greece worthwhile, and that some of them are obvious, some of them perhaps not so much. So again, let's see what we can do from that perspective. But first things first, let's take you to Athens. So one of the most incredible things that I found of the city of Athens are the views from Mount Lycabettus. Lycabettus is incredibly amazing place. You can either go up there through the funicular or on foot. It's about 277 meters above the sea level. And as you can see on the picture on the right, the pathway is a little bit on a slope. So this is not to say super inaccessible or a particularly hard climb, but of course, consider that you actually have to make your way up there properly if you're gonna go on foot. The funicular is actually quite affordable. It's running pretty much all day round from morning until quite late at night. So it's a good way of doing it. And in fact, if you want to get the best of both worlds, I very much suggest that you go up the funicular first and then you take it easy on your way down. Why do I suggest that? Well, first of all, that would save you some breathing and some walking, that's for sure. But I think after you've been up there, you will notice that the viewing platform is actually quite small. And by taking your time going downwards, you can really take in different viewpoints of Athens. You also can potentially even enjoy some of the terraces and bars that are either at the top or on the way down to the bottom. So I think it will just make a better experience than going all the way up, where perhaps you may be a bit more caught up on, oh, I need to make it up there, if you see what I mean, and then getting the funicular down. Plus, once you're actually down from Mount Lycabettus, the area where it actually leaves you at the base of is the neighborhood and the edge of Kolonaki. And just walking around those streets, I think is a nice experience. It's a relatively quiet neighborhood. It has a lot of small shops. It has lots of little cafes, restaurants, stuff like that. Well, for example, if you were to do it the other way around, again, you may necessarily not go looking for those things because you are on a mission to climb up the hill. Well, you know, the reason why Mount Lycabettus, by the way, is also very important is because this is the tallest point in Athens. And we actually think that where the chapel is now, there is a little church in there dedicated to St. George. There may have been a previous temple of Zeus. And perhaps that is the reason why the Mount Lycabettus was so important in Athenian culture. But it's definitely one of those spots because, if you don't use the funicular, this is an entirely free activity that you can do. It will give you definitely that if factor of Athens. And if you're like my sister, who is in her early 20s and very much up with sort of Gen Z culture, she kept on saying, "Oh my God, this gives me exact Mamma Mia vibes." So if you're looking for that sort of Greek holiday wow romanticism, I think this would really be for you. But don't get too caught up in Lycabettus. There's a lot of things to do in Athens. So let's move to the next destination. This is probably your next point of call if you're going up or down Lycabettus. The Hellenic Parliament is actually not far away from the base of Lycabettus itself, maybe 10-15 minute walk, if so. And the Hellenic Parliament is an important spot because, well, first of all, is a very important place from the point of view of Greek history. This is now the place where all of their parliamentary actions take place. Previously, it was actually a palace and by the royal family. And what is very interesting is to see, of course, the change of the guard in here. It happens hourly, and it's truly quite wonderful. I do appreciate that there are some other places in the world that perhaps have more famous changes of the guards, aka London, right? Whether you're in the Tower or maybe, in some of the streets of Westminster or even up in Buckingham Palace. I appreciate that's quite flashy because, the uniforms and whatnot. But actually, and without, really wanting to sound anti-British or whatever, I actually like the change of the Hellenic Guard a lot more. Simply because there is something wonderful about the minimalism of it all. The change of the guard in London is like, oh, wow, so many people doing so many things. This is quite literally just two guys that are protecting their posts in there and that are in front of the memorial to the unknown soldier, which, if you're paying close attention, looks a little bit like a Spartan from ancient times, performing this dance-like ritual, which is quite entrancing, I find. And if you want to actually see what the change of the guard looks like, in our complete tours playlist, you will find a live stream that I did when I was over there, just in case you really want to understand why this is quite cool. So definitely something that you should do. And again, another reason why to really, swing by the area of the Hellenic Parliament is that this is right in front of Syntagma Square, which is one of the main squares in the city center of Athens, going down towards the neighborhood of Monastiraki, which is where a lot of the main, let's say, historical attractions are. And it's also where a lot of the public transport sort of connects together. So definitely a place that is, handy to know of. Well, another spot that I think is great in Athens, and again entirely free of charge, are the lovely botanic gardens. This is over 12 hectares of land, all dates from the 19th century. The gardens have plenty of spaces to sit down if you just want to go and chill. The amount of shade that they produce is actually great, particularly if you consider the quite abrasive heat in Athens. When I was there, it was the beginning of the year. I was there between February and March, and it was already quite warm. The day that I left for the UK, we were already at like 22 degrees, and I arrived to England and we were at 10. So, one of those things. So, the aridity of the climate in Athens and the press of the heat of the sun has been renowned for actually causing a lot of health problems for visitors. So if you don't really know what to do, this is a great spot where to chill down, enjoy nature, smell the beautiful smell of oranges, and you will also see a few other bits and pieces that are scattered across the actual across the actual botanic gardens because they have several monuments, whether it's statues or remains of ancient parts of the city, including part of the Roman baths and also a little exposed area of a mosaic from Roman times. So, not necessarily a very, very flashy thing like the Acropolis, but still very much worthwhile. And well, at the end of the walk across the Botanic Garden, you have the area of Zappeion. And Zappeion was built for the first modern Olympic Games in 1888, if I remember correctly, in preparation for the games themselves. And it's actually quite a beautiful building just on its own. The area connects with a different set of gardens, which will take you back to the area of the Panathic Stadium, and is very peaceful. I didn't see it ever all that ridiculously busy, which is another thing that you also want in a city like Athens. The crowds can get quite a lot, even in low season. So knowing spaces that are nice, cute, and relaxing are important part of any holiday, I believe. Well, just opposite from the area of Zappeion, you cross over to the area where you can find the Temple of Zeus. Now, as you can see, at the moment where I was there, they were doing a lot of conservation work in here. And, well, frankly, and maybe this will sound like a crime, I don't think that paying the amount of money that you have to pay to go and see the Temple of Zeus is worthwhile. I took this picture literally over the fence, like hundreds of tourists more were doing. You can't actually get all that close to the perimeter, as I'm sure you can see, because it's, safeguarded for the sake of conservation and what have you not. But in reality, there isn't actually all that much left in here. The way that you access the Temple of Zeus is either by buying an independent ticket or you buy a ticket for the whole of the ancient patrimony, which includes places like the Agora, the Roman Forum, Hadrian's Library, things like that. And then you can do that as well with or without the Acropolis. In high season, just the Acropolis alone is pretty much the best part of 30 euros. So if you do the whole complex, you're already paying, premium money, the best part of 40 euros to actually see everything. And frankly, a lot of the ancient sites in Athens are not in the greatest state of repair. And even if they are in the greatest state of repair, which is really not the case, your ability to engage with it is quite limited. Unless you hire a tour or anything like that, you will not be able to learn absolutely anything about this site. Something that one of my biggest criticisms, I think, of being a tourist, without considering I'm a historian and I have background knowledge to actually access these sites and understand why they matter. For the average tourist, there is very little information to be able to engage and make more of an area which is in a not great state of conservation. So just keep that in mind, because this is what a lot of people go to do when they go to Athens, and a lot of people end up disappointed because it takes a lot of time to go around the sites, since they're sort of near each other, but they are either big or you need to still walk a fair bit. And well, it can be something that necessarily doesn't give you, everything that you want. But well, we'll talk more about them in a moment. Now, just over from here, and in case that you want to do like a nice route, so I'm giving you this idea for like a first day in Athens, I guess, or something like that. Nearby the Zappeion and the Temple of Zeus, you have the area of the Panathic Stadium. It's a very cool, impressive site. Again, if you're into the Olympics or if you are into, understanding the huge effort and joy that this brought to the Greek state in the 19th century, considering all the misery and damage that they suffered through their War of Independence and the years of control under Turkish power. It's a really amazing, magnificent sight to see. But what you see is what you get. So again, the ticket to go inside, in which frankly you don't do much more than going around, the actual stadium itself, is relatively high. If I remember correctly, and this was in low season, it was a little bit less than 10 euros, but consider that low season in Greece is pretty much from November to February. That's it. Most people are probably going to be traveling the rest of the year, and the price is quite literally double. And, I actually had the pleasure to engage with a lot of local tour guides and a lot of locals who made it very clear, in Greece, in Athens specifically, tourism season means that all of the prices inflate themselves and people will take advantage of that. So keep an eye on that. Cool place, impressive place, but I don't think it's necessarily, one of those areas where you pay in to go in. You can still enjoy it without necessarily, spending time or money further than what it's required. And sometimes when you're traveling, some places are really just that. They are just a quick spot to think, wow, okay, this is cool, but moving on. So don't let the razzle dazzle of places like Athens, take you away from what actually matters most. And let's start talking about what matters most. Well, like I said, this is the ancient part of Athens. This is normally where everyone wants to go, to the neighborhoods of Plaka and Monastiraki. And well, like I said, I have my opinions about it, and maybe they are not the popular opinions that everyone wants to hear, but I'm gonna give them to you anyway, because as a tour guide, I feel it's my obligation to not take you into a tourist trap, although you will find a lot of predatory tourism essentially leads with that example. And more importantly, as a historian, again, I don't feel they are necessarily what a lot of people need from these cultural sites. So, if you want to actually see the Acropolis, you need to get up there, you need to walk up there. There is really not an easy way to get there unless you get one of those tour buses that will get you still to the base of the Mount Arapiles, and then you're going to have to make your way over there. Again, you will have to get a ticket, which is only entrance to the complex. And as you see, this was already pretty busy. This photo was taken mid-February. You will encounter queues when you go into high season. We did have a queue in February. It was quite low because the day we got there had actually snowed. But again, keep that into consideration. You can buy sometimes tickets online, but Greek facilities for things that are run by the state aren't always necessarily the most accessible online. So again, something to consider as a traveler. Well, the Acropolis, of course, is one of those iconic places, and if you really don't know why people want to go there, is because of this. This is the Parthenon. This is the famous temple of the goddess Athena. In fact, it's not just the only part of the Acropolis that is dedicated to the goddess Athena. We also have this, which is the famous Erechtheion. And this, by the way, is a photo that has been taken from afar. So you will never get, you know, as near as you're seeing here to the actual statues. Just something to consider. The best way of actually enjoy these statues is by looking at them in the Acropolis Museum, which is a bit farther down from the Arapiles itself. Now, this is not to say do not go and see the Acropolis or any of these sites. Again, I'm just trying to encourage you to make smart decisions depending your budget and what you actually want to get from your time in Greece. I was very lucky that when I went here, I actually had an ancient historian walking with me explaining absolutely everything that there was to know about this place. But again, as you can see, hopefully from the last two pictures, the whole area of the Acropolis is not in the greatest state of conservation. In fact, when I was there, the Greek government had just received a lot of money from UNESCO to actually do some very, very necessary repairs. And again, one of those things that we're trying to do in the world of tourism, those of us who advocate for slow travel and sustainable tourism, is to try not to avoid but to limit and control the amount of mass places and mass areas that we send our travelers to. The Acropolis is of course impressive and it's really cool, but there are lots of other places in uh, Athens or in Greece that will give you a similar experience if what you want to enjoy is the ancient world. This is not the best Greek ruin. If you actually want to see the best ruins that are preserved of ancient times, I'm afraid to say it's not even Greece where you have to go. Many of them are actually in islands in the Mediterranean or in Turkey. So consider what is it that you want to get from this. And like I said, if you really want to see the Carities in the Erechtheion, go to the museum and look at the statue in a way that is safe for the item and where you're gonna get much better, value for money out of it. Well, One place that I do think is really worthwhile when you actually are in Athens regarding the actual ancient monuments is taking the pass over to the Roman Forum and the Agora. They are nowhere near as busy as the Acropolis, and you still get some beautiful views of the Acropolis from there. However, if you want to see the best views of the Acropolis, what you really need to do is go up Mount Philopappus and the Pnyx, but I'll talk about that in just a moment. Well, this is actually a photo taken in the Roman Forum with the Tower of the Winds, which is a really cool early instrument designed to essentially try to predict the weather control. Again, you're going to go through all of these places without a lot of information about them. So just consider that the context that you're going to have for this is limited. But the photos in the Roman Forum and in the Agora are actually quite cool, and you will, I think, engage with Athens in a more realistic way. Consider that the Acropolis was not a place where most people were going every single day of their lives. The Roman Forum and the Agora were, though. So if you really want to understand what that was like, these are the places to go. The Agora is also very cool because they have this recreated stoa, which was this kind of colonnades, streets made essentially with columns and covered roofs, where a lot of their marketplaces, shops, and entertainment was actually kept. But now they also have a small museum in there that you get access to with your ticket to the Agora. And they have actually some very important and interesting pieces right there. So definitely one that I would recommend. And particularly if you're like on just a 1 day tour of Athens and you don't have a lot of time, again, you will save queuing space, moving up and down the hill, etc. But more importantly, if you actually want to see a Greek temple in a great state of repair, you need to go to the Agora to see, in fact, the Temple of Hephaestus, which is one of the best preserved temples in the whole Greek world. You actually can get pretty much as close to it as you want without actually going inside it. Unlike with the Parthenon, for example, or the Erechtheion, or any of the temples up in the Acropolis, and you will be able to actually see still some decoration, which is in a much better state of conservation than up in the Acropolis itself. So 100% points to the Agora and the Roman Forum, as well as Hadrian's library. Those would be, I think, the places where I would repeat and go if I was to go to Athens with someone who hadn't experienced any of this beforehand. But most importantly, one thing that you must do in Athens is, of course, try the amazing Greek food. And please do eat like a local. Engage in their beautiful culture of vegetables, fish, seafood. It is almost impossible eating bad in Athens. You have to really get unlucky. There are going to be many, many sort of touristic places nearby the area of the Agora and the Roman Forum in the area of Monastiraki. They are quite busy, and you may find, particularly depending where you come from in Europe or even the United States or certain parts in the Western world, that walking around this area can be a little bit not just claustrophobic but annoying. A lot of waiters in the actual terraces are gonna try to be pulling you into their restaurant. Some of them are nice and charming, some of them are quite invasive. So the best way to avoid that is actually by taking some of the back streets, literally often just a corner street in comparison to the main area where everyone is walking to, and going to these more quiet, still traditional, still top-notch restaurants where you will be treated like a king and where you will be paying, well, essentially pennies in comparison. This whole meal, if I remember correctly, cost me about 25 euros, if that was even it. And as you see, there was a lot of food in there. The fish was actually cut in front of me, cleaned from, spines and anything. It was truly wonderful. And I actually became a regular in this restaurant. They actually knew me by name and everything. And it was truly a lovely experience to enjoy. So, where you go, engage with the locals and let the locals sort of lead the way, if you see what I mean. Well, and this is the place where you can get some of the best views of the Acropolis entirely for free. This is Mount Philopappus, so it's another of the hills around Athens. The best way to access this is either from the edge of Monastiraki or essentially walking backwards from the area of where we've been earlier through Zappeion and whatnot. You will have to go up the hill once again, and the terrain in this area is quite slippery. There is a lot of marble and a lot of, stones that are loose and often covered in dust. So make sure you bring appropriate footwear, otherwise you may end up in a dirt path or simply slipping and may not be necessarily what you are looking for. But this is a beautiful sort of national park that they have in here. Green spaces in Athens and in Greece overall are not terribly abundant, again, because of the weather. So to be able to just walk around the city center and engage with this lovely space where you don't just have ruins from the ancient world, but you have, Orthodox churches and important places like the Pnyx, which is the birthplace of Athenian democracy. This was essentially the first sort of assembly of the ancient world. It will really, hopefully, transport you to a much more authentic version of Athens that I think is much more worthwhile in that regards. And of course, the great thing about this is that all of it is very, very walkable. Getting public transport in Athens is kind of a waste of time unless you're gonna go long distances. Uh, Not really much point grabbing the tube from Syntagma to Monastiraki itself to get access to all of these places. It's barely 2 stops, and you can walk them within 20 minutes, half an hour at most, with the ability to actually enjoy and see all of the sights. I cannot emphasize how important it is to actually walk through the city center and look up and around you, because in some of these ancient towns, if you're not doing that, you're actually missing the point of the town. There are buildings from all kinds of different time periods, often a mishmash of them, and by kind of just skipping from one place to another, you're really missing the charm. So explore Monastiraki, go up the hill, have good food, and of course, ensure that you are engaging with either nightlife or at least the places where people are gathering. This is Monastiraki Square at night, which is perhaps one of my most memorable places of my time in Athens. You have in here a beautiful Byzantine church. No photos allowed inside, but honestly, the art is just to die for and incredible. You have the famous Monastiraki Market, which although has a bit of a bad reputation for being potential place for pickpockets and whatnot, as long as you're a bit smart and you're actually careful of not, flashing your money everywhere you go, it's very safe. And on top of that, as you can see, the views are incredible. In the area of Monastiraki as well, by the way, in case that you're into photography and you want to get a better, I guess, experience of it all, there are a lot of sort of sky gardens or bars that are at an elevated area with rooftops where you can get a drink, which is actually not that expensive, and really enjoy, I guess, Athens from a different aerial perspective. Definitely another activity that I would very, very much recommend. And, something particularly good to do if you're going in the months where light is not as easily abundant, because you're going to find out that the Greek timetables are perhaps a bit different than what most of the Western world is used to. So be able to have still activities, after it gets dark at 5 or 6 p.m. is a good thing to have on your skill set. Well, now let's talk about the museums, because frankly, I think the museums is the most important thing in Athens and not enough people go to them, even though they are key. Well, there are many, many, many museums in Athens, more than you can have time or money to visit. So these are the ones that I have picked that I think offer a very good selection of history and culture. You don't have to agree with me, but this may be a good place for you to start and maybe find others that are a bit more niche that may be more suited to your tastes and interests. Well, the first one, of course, is the National Historical Museum, which is a lovely space and very important for two reasons. The building itself is beautiful, and the building was the previous parliament. So if you want to understand the context of history in a very historical place, this is the best way to go. More importantly, although the museum has, different facets and different aspects of history that it presents, this is the best place where to learn very in depth and with very modern displays about the War of Greek Independence, which is a defining moment in the history of the country. The 19th century is going to be the moment of liberation for the Greek people after hundreds of years of having been exploited or under the control of other overlords. So, in order to understand Greece as a country nowadays, this is crucial. So, if you really want to be, in tune with your Greek history, a must stop. And actually quite affordable. The entrance, uh, I think it was €7 when I was there, but again, that was in low season, so consider that. This is the inside of the museum, just so you can understand how the displays are built and the importance of the parliament, of course. So it's also a very beautiful building just to simply sit down in there and just look around at the decor, which is incredibly beautiful neoclassical concepts. And then a museum that is, of course, very important is the Archaeology Museum. In here, you can find anything that should be in the sites of not just Athens, but half of Greece. If you don't really have time to go everywhere, this is the best place to go. All of the archaeological finds are actually here. They are very well exposed and often with a fair amount of information. The museum is also really big, so make sure that you allocate enough time to visit. It's not, it is in the city center, but it's not necessarily in the city center where everything else is. So from the area of Kolonaki, it's about a 20-25 minute, half an hour walk towards the Pluruluru west. If you are staying in Plaka or Monastiraki, it may be 40 minutes. You may actually want to perhaps either do an Uber or catch a bus or the tram. Just, keep that in mind. And well, this is some of the examples that you can actually find in here. These are the frescoes from Tinris in Mycenae, or from the Mycenaean period, in fact. And this is just one of the highlights that I decided to pick from the actual from the museum. The amount of gold from Mycenaean times, the Minoan artifacts, honestly, it is overwhelming. If you are really into your artifacts, into your pottery, your golden objects, etc., and sculpture, of course, this is a must stop for you. But my favorite museum actually in Athens was the Benaki Museum. The Benaki actually have more than one museum. This is the main Benaki Museum nearby the Hellenic Parliament. It's kind of halfway through between the Hellenic Parliament and I'll say it, Mount Lycabettus. In fact, in that street, there is a few other museums that are very much worth a while. This was an entire Turkish house from the period of Ottoman rule, I believe from the 18th century, that they literally are just preserving right there. And that's one of the many things that I could show you. Of course, there is ancient Greek stuff in here as well. This was just something that I really wasn't expecting to find in the museum itself, alongside with this beautiful jewelry collection, naval jewelry from the 18th century, all in lovely enamel, and of course, gilded jewelry. So again, it's a museum that is not terribly big, but it contains some wonderful treasures, which I would have completely missed if instead I would have spent a lot more time traveling to places that are far away, inaccessible, or perhaps, not so not so worthy of the time and money that I had. So this is just a handful of museums. I actually went to many, many more. The museums in Athens are honestly what make this city a beautiful cultural place. So consider where you're spending your time and money. Now, let's move out of Athens because we've spent enough time in Athens and there are many other places to go. Now, of course, since I was in Greece for a while, I decided that maybe I wanted to explore a place that I had always felt some interest about, which was Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi is a very important part of the Greek world. It's a very important part of Greek mythology. And I thought it was an interesting thing that I ought to do, although it's of course a very obvious touristic destination. I think it's important though to understand, if you want to go and see the Oracle of Delphi, what to expect. You can't, unless you drive, you can't really get up there to Delphi on your own and see the site. So the easiest way for you to do this is through an organized bus tour. From Athens, it's going to take you the best part of 3 hours one way and the other, so it's a long day. You're pretty much using the whole day to go, and the buses leave early, so you're going to have to be up and ready for the bus to pick you up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're not going to be back until, late at night. You have to be very convinced that what you want to see in Delphi is worth your while. When we went, this was low season, and not all of the aspects of the archaeological site in Delphi were open. And this is something else to be careful about. Some of these places, depending on the influx of public, do not have all their facilities, easily available. So ensure that what you're going to see is actually, there for you to see. So the importance, of course, of the Oracle of Delphi. This is a UNESCO site. This is the seat of the Pythia, the famous oracle that was able to predict the future or perhaps see prophecies, and then people would make out of them whatever they wanted. The area where this is all located is in the beautiful slopes of Mount Parnassus, which is very important as well because in the world of Greek mythology is home to the Muses. And, the overall complex is quite interesting. There is still a lot of archaeological evidence that have been left behind, like, for example, what we see in here, which is one of the treasuries that were built in the area of the Oracle of Delphi, essentially as a tribute. This was the treasury for Athens, which was a way of paying off for the tip that they had been given regarding the Battle of Marathon and their victory. What you see in here, though, is mostly a reconstruction, and I think you can tell because there is a lot of material in there that is not original. So again, a lot of the problems that we have in these ancient sites is finding the balance between what is still original and what is, an intervention to keep things going. Well, the main reason, though, why a lot of people come up here is to see the Temple of Apollo, which is, a big complex from the 4th century BC. But actually, one of my favorite things of the whole complex was the theater. It is actually in a wonderful state of conservation, and it helps us understand that everything that happened in Delphi wasn't just, a matter of the oracle. There were very important events taking place in this site, including the Pythian Games, which is, well, one of the reasons why Delphi was actually quite important. The Pythian Games were like the Olympics, these type of competitions took place every 4 years or so, and it was a vital aspect of developing this part of the country. This, by the way, is what you can see here from the top of the Temple of Apollo. But again, you don't get to see all that much because it's just the outline of the actual temple itself. But you get an idea of the scenery. To be fair, the ride on the bus is beautiful. The whole countryside is absolutely gorgeous. And again, if I would have been able to actually visit either the Tholos, the Gymnasium, or the Stadium, or the Hippodrome, which were things we were not able to see this time, perhaps my time and money in Delphi would have been better invested. And yet, I left Delphi very, very happy because we got access to the museum. And again, the museum is one of those places that I was just so thankful to be able to visit. The museum contains several archaeological pieces that are not, of course, in the main archaeological museum in Athens. It has pretty good explanations overall of what things are. This is one of the sort of metallic bulls that we have found in the area, which is quite remarkable and unlike anything that I had seen before. It has a fair few scale models for you to understand, the size of this place, which again, I think is important when we're dealing with archaeological sites because it's difficult to kind of, lose sight of how big these places were or not. And of course, it has one of the most important things and the reason why I came here, which is the famous charioteer. The charioteer of Delphi is one of the greatest sculptures in the ancient world. The degree of detail, the state of conservation, the fact that this still has eyes, the eyes of the statue are still there and they look like they are alive. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to go because, as my background as a cultural and art specialist, it was something that I wanted to see in the flesh. But as you see, I did have a tour guide in this trip. And one of the best things when you actually get on these bus tours is that actually you get everything explained because again, otherwise the accessibility of the information can be a bit difficult. And if you're gonna go on one of these bus tours, do a lot of research to ensure that you're getting local businesses with tour guides that are, I mean, all of the tour guides in Greece have very high standards because they need to be approved, of course, by the government. But find people that are of high caliber and that have really good reviews. Anybody can take you around and, point out places and be done with it. The information that I got in here was top notch, and it wasn't just a script. You could ask this woman any question you would have, and she was a wealth of knowledge. So ensure that you are getting quality knowledge while you're up there. And of course, don't forget to see the Omphalos, the famous center of the earth. The legend says that this was actually created because, well, Zeus wanted to figure out where it was. He let two eagles loose and they met here. And that's the other reason why Delphi was ever so important and why it became such a pivotal point for all of the myths, legends, and ancient histories of the ancient world. And another thing that we actually saw on our way up to Delphi is a lovely town of Arakova. Arakova is particularly a ski resort, so it's very popular in the winter. But even if you go in, at any other moment of the year, or you are not interested in skiing, it's just a beautiful, picturesque town with a lot of Byzantine and Orthodox churches, which I think is really worthwhile and definitely the place where to stop. I wasn't so happy with the place where we stopped in my tour for lunch because we were so far away. Lunch was sort of included in the actual package, and I really wish we would have had more time in Arakova so I could have actually eaten there. So learn from my mistakes and actually, do this the sensible way. But Arakova is a wonderful, lovely place. But we are pretty much done with Delphi, so let's move on to our next destination, which is Chalkis or Halkida. This is a place that I was not expecting to go, but that we kind of went to because, well, the time when I was there corresponded with Carnival. And Chalkis actually has the only sea carnival and parade in Greece, which is quite amazing. As you see, it is the main city in the island of Euboea or Evia, depending which name you want to use, in the Euripus Strait. And back in the day, it was a very important city-state. In antiquity, it's even mentioned in the Iliad, but it mostly becomes important in the Middle Ages, which is also why I wanted to go, because this is the part of Greece that gets some very juicy intermingling of people. It mostly acquires importance during the period of the Crusades because of this. It's gonna become Negroponte, one of the locations owned by the Venetians. This is actually the fortress of Carababa, which was taken over by the Ottomans from the Venetians in 1470. Because, well, as the Crusades develop, they take over different nations in the Mediterranean. It's going to be an absolute thrilling, though very complicated story to tell. And the fact that, again, I was able to go into this without paying a single penny, this was entirely open to the public, was really quite wonderful. The fortress itself is in a nice state of conservation. It's actually quite big, and it has a little museum inside where, in case you were doubting the existence of the Venetians in here are the lions of St. Mark that used to actually be at the entrance of the town and the fortress itself. It's a truly wonderful space where to learn about how the intermingling of different peoples make different parts of Greece have very different characters. And it's something that you could tell. The people of Chalkis had nothing to do with Athenians. They were, they were Greek, but their own version of Greece. And that's something very important. Go to Greece and see Greece for all it's worth. Don't put them all in just one big basket, because they are not. Well, on top of the area of Carababa, there are a few other small museums in Chalkis of history that are very much worth the while and relatively cheap. So again, one of those things to very much recommend. But of course, another thing that is wonderful of the area are the views. The seascapes and the area of the coast is just absolutely wonderful. So if you want to go to a destination that has, beautiful views of water, but you don't want to go to, stereotypically, I guess, busy areas like the Athenian Riviera or some of the islands, Chalkis is definitely the place to go. And if you happen to catch the carnival, it's a wonderful time. It was very animated, and it was very different from the carnivals that I'm used to in Spain, for example. In the UK, we don't really celebrate carnival. So it was very, very fun. And despite being super full of people. We didn't have trouble at all finding a place where to eat. Um, Everybody made sure that there was space for you to come and have a look at the parade. So everything was very civil in that regard. And we actually got to Chalkis by train. It was literally about an hour from Athens. And again, the surprise of how cheap it was, because I think it was maybe 10 euros each. It was very, very remarkable in that sense. Well, let's leave Chalkis behind to go to another very important part of the ancient world and that I knew I had to see when I was in Greece, no matter what. This was even a more non-negotiable than Delphi, Mycenae, because Mycenae is one of those evocative places that really, really changed the history of mankind in many ways. This is about 120 kilometers away from Athens. It's near Argos and Corinth, which are another two very lovely sites to visit. But at this moment in time, when I went, they were not open all day. So something else to consider. Like I said, timetables off season are different, and when you are in on season, some of these places can be really fully booked. So plan ahead. Well, everything that is in Mycenae dates from the second millennia before Christ or before Common Era, all the way up to the year 1100 before Common Era or before Christ. It was a massive military stronghold, which is one of the reasons why Mycenae is so famous, because of its insanely huge walls. And it is, of course, a UNESCO heritage site. It had about 30,000 people living in the site at the time of its peak. And well, it's it's a wonderful area to explore. Again, the mountains and the mix of mountain and archaeology is really quite unforgettable, and it's probably one of my favorite things about traveling through Greece. Um, Nature and archaeology just fit well together. And the important thing about exploring Mycenae is the fact that this is the establishment of the early phases of Greek civilization. The style that is most famous in here is what we call Cyclopean architecture, which is what you see in here, because as you see, these rocks are absolutely massive. The size of the blocks made people believe this had actually been built by giants. So it's very evocative. It very much gives you the vibes of Indiana Jones. As a historian, I think every historian in their lifetime wants to have that feeling of, wow, I feel like I'm in an Indiana Jones movie. Maybe it's very cheesy, but I think it's true. And this was definitely my Indiana Jones moment. Well, the area itself is full of, urban complexes, temples, and burials inside. And, we don't necessarily know everything that we could know about this place, but the problem is, well, when we're looking so far in the distant past, sometimes we don't have the clearest idea as to what these places truly meant or what is myth and what is legend. But history says, if we are to believe it, that the city was actually founded by Perseus, the Greek hero that defeats the Gorgon, and that the one of the leaders in the Trojan War, Agamemnon, was actually living here, and potentially his troops departed from this very area. Um, Much of what you see, though, was already in ruins by the time the Romans come and take over this area. And it's one of the things that mystify us a little bit. This is an account that we have from Pausanias, if I remember correctly. And to have been such a strong civilization for such an awful amount of time, and then already be left for dead by the time the Romans come, it seems quite surprising. But it doesn't take away anything from the complex itself. This is one of the tolos, or essentially what is a beehive tomb. We either call this the treasury of Atreus or the tomb of Agamemnon. The reality is that we don't know if it's one or the other. Again, this is based on legend, but it is the largest in the Aegean in Bronze Age, all the way until Rome, and it's still one of the largest corbel domes in the whole of Europe. And in case you don't know what a corbel dome is, it's essentially like a fake arched dome structure. And well, a lot of what we know about this place has much to do with the mythology around it due to the interpretation of antiquarian uh, tradition of the 18th and 19th century. So again, remember that our understanding of history hasn't always been as crystal clear as it is nowadays. So sometimes one of the reasons why we don't have necessarily all the info is because when some of these early excavations were done, well, people were simply not as knowledgeable or careful to note everything that they found, and sometimes we are just lacking context. The area itself also has a small museum. It's not as impressive, I find, as the one in Delphi. Personally, I think that the museum in Delphi was better, but it still has some very interesting items from the local area, which really help put the whole site into context. And again, well, wherever you go in the ancient world, in Greece, whatever, if you're going to an archaeological site and you miss the museum, you're missing the trick, because in the museum is often where you can find at least some context. Again, you walk through Mycenae without pretty much seeing a single information post anywhere. So you need to get your details from somewhere. Go to the museum. Don't be one of those people of just walking around without knowing what they saw, because at the end of the day, ruins all start looking the same way. Try and go in there. Imagine the people that lived in there based on what you're seeing in the artifact collections, and then engage with them from that local perspective. And that is how these places become valuable. Otherwise, like I said, seeing one ruin, you've seen them all. That's the honest truth. From the point of view of black and white bias, that's the honest truth about ruins and ancient societies. But taking you to the last destination of the tour, this is Nafplio. And Nafplio is definitely my unexpected highlight of Greece. Nafplio used to be the capital of the Hellenic Republic at first, and the Kingdom of Greece throughout the 19th century. And it's a beautiful, gorgeous place by the sea. This is not far away from Mycenae, so you could actually do them both on the same day, which is actually what I did. And it is a place with a ton of history. First of all, this was an actual Greek colony, in ancient times from Argos. And we do have actually a few leftovers from the ancient times, mostly city walls and fortresses. But what is very impressive is that the fortresses are not just there from ancient times, then they get taken over by the Byzantines, by the Venetians, and the Turks. So again, the mishmash of cultures in here, despite being on opposite ends of the country, in comparison with Chalkis, is really quite wonderful. And it's a very evocative landscape, not just because, again, you have the mix of nature and archaeology, but because it's so peaceful and you get beautiful sea views. Well, it is the Crusades, just like Chalkis in this case, that puts the area of Nafplio first into the spotlight. And then, well, it becomes a kind of a tennis match. The Venetians come and take it for much of the Middle Ages until in the 16th century, the Ottomans take it over. And then the Venetians take it back on the 17th century and form what we call the Kingdom of Moreo. And Nafplio was actually the capital of this. Then the Ottomans take it back in the 18th century, and that is how we end up with this beautiful, beautiful town. The thing in here again is that you're gonna have to go up and up and up and up and up the hill. If you want to see whether it's the Palamidi fortress or the ancient part of the wall, you need to go up the hill. You will have to do quite a lot of exercise in a lot of these Greek towns. Public transport in Nafplio is not as good as in Athens, and I can pretty much say the same for Chalkis in this particular case. So do not underestimate the amount of walking that you're going to have to do, not necessarily through even or flat terrain. We're visiting a lot of destinations. A lot of people don't realize how mountainous Greece is until you're flying and arriving to one of the airports, and all you see is, that kind of up and down, up and down, up and down sort of terrain. So do really come prepared. Do not underestimate the physicality of this journey between the terrain, the heat, and the climate conditions. The humidity levels, for example, in Nafplio, just like in Athens perhaps, are quite high because you're by the sea. And although it's warm waters, well, the weather is also warm. So eh, be hydrated, take care of yourself, etc. And again, just go through the town and enjoy the little pieces. This is one of the many different streets. It's very colorful, which is something that was nice to see in comparison to, some of the other villages, towns, etc. that I explored in Athens. This was very, very colorful and definitely had that, feeling of a multicultural town that had gone, through the motions. And well, what a lot of people don't know is that Nafplio is actually a very big touristic resort for the very Greeks. So a lot of Greek people, when they want to go on holiday, they don't necessarily go to the touristy places where other people not from Greece go to. Nafplio is their place to go because of this, the charming streets, the quaint sort of environment, and well, also because Nafplio has a little bit of dark history. Here, just on the side of the Byron Hotel, it's one of the churches in the area where Capodistrias, the first proper sort of prime minister of the Free Republic, of the Hellenistic Republic, was actually killed. So, again, the political drama follows you anywhere that you go in Greece, and you really need to give it a chance to again understand the importance of different time periods in this country. Not everything in Greece is just the golden age. Not everything in Greece is just, the Athens of Pericles and that kind of stuff. Greece is so much more than that. Don't let your, I guess, one-sided view of ancient civilizations create a one-dimensional view of a country with a very lot complex history like that. And another thing that you see in here is, again, go to the Orthodox churches, engage in all of this Byzantine and later Turkish inheritance that has been left in there, and try to mentally navigate how this very culturally diverse country has done its best to survive through the ages to become what it is nowadays. But of course, if you're in Nafplio, go have a walk around by the waterfront. It is absolutely stunning. This was one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my whole life. My sister, who is one of those people who loves the golden hour, just like she had her Mamma Mia moment on the top of Mount Lycabettus, she literally could not get enough pictures of this area because it was truly a dream, with the castle right there in the middle of the water, which is Burzi Castle, one of the Venetian defenders in the 17th century, or whether it is a little bit farther back where you can see, the little boats, one of the cruise ships, because it's a cruise ship destination, the area with the palm trees, with restaurants, lovely places to grab ice cream, whatever. It is truly charming. So make the most out of it, but make the most out of it as a whole, so you don't end up with just a one-dimensional view of Nafplio or any other place that you go to in Greece. Do not become one of those tourists that left the country without truly having engaged with the actual essence of it all. Greece is and will always be one of those countries that will attract thousands of tourists because of its history, because of its beaches, because of its climate, because of its food. But it's important that when we visit places that are so consumed by mass tourism, we do it from an actual intentional perspective. And I appreciate many of you. I'm already preaching to the choir, but I genuinely mean this. Greek people are very aware of how important tourism is for them, but they are also very aware of how ruthless and not always terribly kind or nice are mass tourism, establishments for their country, for their local economy. And it's important, particularly given the state of the Greek nation, that you invest in the local economy. So buy your ice cream for the local Greek, grandma that perhaps doesn't know a word of English, but has been making that ice cream for the last 50 years of her life. And it will be the best ice cream that you will have. And go and explore some of these off the beaten path places, which is not necessarily where everyone goes. Even though they may be places that still have something mainstream that is interesting, don't fall in the same traps that the tourism industry is trying to push destinations like Greece as, because there is so much more to them than the XYZ that cruise ship companies, tour operators, and travel agencies are trying to sell you. And first and foremost, if you can afford it, do hire your local guides. Hire your local guides or buy a book that is written by someone who is local that will actually tell you the places to go, the things that are not so well known outside of, the mainframe idea of tourism. And you will have a much more enjoyable experience. And you will be able to get, to see some of these wonderful places from a completely different perspective. And on that note, I've already spoken enough about Greece, but I hope that you have enjoyed this idea of exploring this country from a different perspective, even though it's a few destinations. I hope that that opens your eyes to approach the area in a different way. And again, if you've been listening all this while, thank you so much for your time. If you are a repeat listener, thank you for your continuous support. If you're new to the house, welcome to Travolution Tours, a space where we try to make tourism, history, and culture as accessible and as full of no-nonsense approach as we can. I will be seeing you on the next one, but until then, I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day. And remember that if you want to keep on supporting us via PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee, the links are right there. But essentially, search us up as Travolution or Travolution Tours, and you will find us anyway. Thank you so much for your time, and have a lovely day. Bye.